look at the alternative. If you don't have this models running locally, I like to run things on device. Every single thing that you do, you're taking notes, you're buying groceries, you're any kind of intent parsing, any kind of content generation, any kind of content summarization, transformation, whatever it may be, the kind of things that you imagine you GPT-2 doing, or now, you have Llama 3 and BERT, whatever. Imagine each of those calls is an internet call outside of your device, goes to a server in Silicon Valley.
Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Glad to be talking to you and asking you questions about open source AI.
All right. Yes. Happy to be here. Thanks, man.
Yeah. So first of all, just for everyone who's maybe not into the debate, they use everything and they say, okay, closed source open source, they don't know what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the difference between open source AI and closed AI? And then we can go into more details.
Sure. I mean, again, I don't have canonical definitions. I just have this fuzzy sort of understanding of every subject. I was asked exactly that question, like, hey, Kush, can you talk about what is open source to you, like at the last lecture? So I kind of thought of what I want to say a bit. And I think to me, open source primarily is not just about like it's free to use and you can download it and run it on your machine and stuff, as opposed to like sending all the calls to someone. There's many connotations of that, and I can get into that. But more just the freedom to like do whatever you want with it and understand what's going on. Like the whole repairability and modifiability thing. And open source, like, to me, that's what fundamentally it means. Like, you have a lot more visibility into what's going on. The thing is not a black box. Like, I'm primarily been a web developer, and among other things, but it's like a JavaScript, like a fucking meme language, right? But I like understanding how computers work. So I still took all the courses, in at least online courses, to understand what is engineering, what are computers, what are electronics, how do these things work? Because I want to understand what's going on. I don't want to just be like, this black box, make websites. So with open source, at least you're getting without that data set for most models, you're getting like a lot of the stuff, and you're able to investigate it, figure out what's going on. And the example that I sort of really cannot get over, the key thing is when Stable Diffusion came out, 2022, I guess. I was just so happy because it's like suddenly we understood what this model is. I remember computer file videos on YouTube about how the latent space can be explored using just array multiplications and all the rest of it. And I was like, this is how it works. This is what's going on in here.
Yeah.
Not, DALL-E, just click button, get image, click button, get image. Or now we added a new feature 6 months later in painting. Like, it took 3 weeks at most for every single feature that OpenAI had to get implemented in Stable Diffusion. And then a month later or something, we get ControlNet, which changes the whole game completely.
Yes, yeah.
So I think open source is freedom to do whatever and actually being able to do it. Closed source is just business. It's like and it's not even good business. Like if Mark Zuckerberg's word means anything, I think at least his philosophy, he's saying it's good for my business to actually open source this shit.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there is good business aspects of open source. So you have a lot of open source companies that are just purely running on that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually, as they venture out more and more they become more and more closed source. But sometimes it's an advantage, right? Even if you're behind, it's good to open source. You open source your model, and then you let the community help you out with it, and then you gain trust too. Like when I'm using open source software, I know that if it's used by enough people, I'm like, okay, it's probably there's probably nothing wrong with it fundamentally, right?
Yeah,
which is a big part of it.
People actually using it in different industries.
Yeah.
That's a big way of watching for the technology for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Facebook is not new to that idea as well. Like PyTorch came out of Facebook, and it's like the standard now. And I think TensorFlow, of course, failed. I think it's fundamentally you'll gain so much by the community actually building on top of it. Llama came out. Llama, the original one, leaking out.
Yeah.
Which I still don't know what the mechanism of that was, who leaked it, whatever. But certainly Llama CPP and a bunch of other things that happened, Alpaca, the format, all this stuff was like, because it was open source, we understood how to actually prompt. Before it was like this thing, like we have this API, it's chat completions, do what you will. Or, we had Instruct before, but like they just started removing functionality from the API. With the model, it was just at your home. You can't just like learn a jailbreak and then have OpenAI suddenly censor lobotomize the model further. You actually get to investigate the months later, like, why did that jailbreak work? Why did that prompt injection work? How would I replicate it? How would I counter it? But with OpenAI's API, you just like, I guess good to know that now they have fixed it. Like now you got to come up with Dan. Now you got to come up with Sydney or whatever new hack.
Yeah.
Seems like you're giving up too much space for learning and play.
So you touched on it a little bit, but why do you think in this space in particular AI that we need open source AI?
I mean, oh, so yeah. So I think on that specific point, I think AI specifically has been. I've been part of a few hype cycles and a few sort of just technology that I really love. VR being one of them, digital fabrication, 3D printing, and so on being one of them. And I can go on rants about that. But I think with AI, it's one of those technologies where imagine the alternative, right? So the current now we have, thankfully, because of big science's Bloom and Stable Diffusion and now Llama and whatever else is happening, Mistral as well, credit. We have this actual model on our machine. We can do a lot with it. Even as Zuckerberg is saying, even if technology stops right now, the progression for a while, we have like really a lot of runway for like building all kinds of cool applications on top of it. And I'm saying, look at the alternative. If you don't have this models running locally, I like to run things on device. Every single thing that you do, you're taking notes, you're buying groceries, you're any kind of intent parsing, any kind of content generation, any kind of content summarization, transformation, whatever it may be, the kind of things that you imagine you GPT-2 doing, or now, you have Llama 3 and BERT, whatever. Imagine each of those calls is an internet call outside of your device, goes to a server in Silicon Valley. Everyone is along the way like, hey, NSA is here, hey, whatever's here. Everyone's fucking, having a great time collecting it all up into a thing. That's life, the alternative. Like that's, to me, it's like in a completely, like, I know Snowden's leaks went only so far in raising consciousness. I think it did to an extent, but that's insane to me. So that for me, the biggest reason actually with AI, it's simply unacceptable for this technology to somehow be a centralized thing. And I think I can make the case for the other side as well, like why it actually is good to be open source without beyond the freedom thing, because it'll actually, like you said, help with building better mechanisms to counter the bad aspects of it, counter mistakes it makes, counter just flaws in the system or even bad actors. But if it's centralized, you're entrusting. We also Microsoft and CrowdStrike and how competent the incumbents are. So I think fundamentally the alternative is just insane. Yeah. Right. I don't know what your thoughts are on
No, I agree. I think let me tell you back to kind of why I like open source and why I kind of discovered open source software.
Yeah.
So it actually came up like back to when I was a kid. I just wanted to be cheap. And I was like, okay, there's a whole bunch of these softwares I don't want to pay for. I don't want to pay for Photoshop. I don't want to pay for like Dreamweaver, all these things, right? So there's one alternative where, you torrent it, which is like, okay, it still seems like you're doing something where you're infringing on this. And then the other alternative is you look for open, like free versions. I'm like, okay, there's a free one. I'm like, there's a GIMP. I'm like, okay, cool. What is this? This is kind of cool. It does a lot of features that Photoshop does, right? So that was a thing. And then I kind of looked further into it. It's like, okay, why is it free? Like, how are they making money? What is it? And I'm like, okay, this is open source. That means that, anyone can contribute. Anyone can kind of build on top of this and use it and have it, for distribution everywhere. And then I started learning more about how, Ubuntu and Linux itself is an open source operating system. Like, okay, like you can do all this stuff that Microsoft's actually doing all this stuff, and you can have it all for free. I remember I was a kid, but I was trying to run Ubuntu on like a small. I think I failed one in even installing it back in the day. But it was just cool to me that you could have access to all these softwares for free, and I was like enticed more so by the price point of it rather than the open source. And then as I came to mature, then the open source side became more relevant for me. But I wanted to get your thoughts. Like, were you always kind of into the open source software, open source community? Were you always looking for like open GitHub things? Or
I mean, I have definitely always loved and benefited from people publishing their work online in openly, without a doubt. I mean, I have used plenty of proprietary software along the way. Like my background is film and animation and so on. So Maya from Autodesk, Adobe Suite, I paid for tens of, however long. Like for just the last year, I stopped paying Adobe rent and started making my own tools for everything. But till now, I pay lots of money to them to have the proprietary, just because the industry was using it. So I have used the proprietary stuff as well, but I have always loved and used the open source as well. So like for example, like when I was building my 3D modeling software and so on, one of the reasons I was doing is because I have UX ideas about how to do things that I think are better than the current incumbents. But also, I was obviously not going to just take a license of a assistant tool like Houdini or Rhino, both tools that I love, and just build on top of them as plugins. No, I was like, no, I want to understand what these things are actually doing, especially for VR. If I'm making 3D modeling, how can I go code? So I explored the landscape of what's possible, what's out there in open source. And there was this library, I think it's a Russian library, but it's a global library really, called Open Cascade. And it's just an actual geometry kernel implemented in open source. Yeah. And I used that as the base for my 3D modeling operations, along with building a game engine for the VR side. But it would not be possible without the open source projects that already exist, because I was looking at them for inspiration. I was looking at them as libraries, and I think it wasn't like so I've been a lot more in immersed in the open source sort of usage and so on side for the last 10 years. But I think it came from a fact that I knew these things existed before. And I can't think of specific examples right now in this moment. I mean, HTML and CSS and just the web has always been open in that way. So you can always go and look at the source and learn from it. But I definitely early on, it was a lot more PowerPoint, Photoshop, all these kind of tools, After Effects, lots of, visual effects stuff. So at that point, I think I was more learning the craft and how far can you push it, the envelope. And now I just have this allergic reaction to proprietary software. So now it's like, even though I have this idea of what I want to do, I gotta hand in hand build the tool to do it, because I'm just not gonna use the proprietary, as
So,
you know. Yeah.
I know you're building your own video editor, but what are some other cool things where you're using a proprietary software, you're like, okay, screw this,
Yeah.
I'm going to use, just build my own. So what are some other examples? I'm just curious to know some.
I mean, there's a bunch that I'm building and trying to build, and then there's a bunch that I've already built in a while. So maybe I'll start with what I've already built. So in the last couple of years, basically I've had this sort of real desire and drive to just, I think after the pandemic, just they've locked you down too much. Just there's big desire to always be out and working at cafes, traveling, whatever. So I started building my own setup to be able to access SSH and so on, all my machines, do file management, do Dockerized running of each piece of software, especially because my home computers have GPUs and my laptop doesn't. It's powerful enough, but not for AI inference. And so built all that stuff manually using Xterm for the front end and all this stuff, right? For the what was I thinking? Built a file explorer. So I have like tens of millions of files. Frankly, 90 million, but a lot of it was Node modules.
Yeah.
I deleted them because JavaScript.
Yeah.
And so figuring out and building web UI, basically Electron, so it's just a UI, and actually like File Explorer. So I've always hated Microsoft File Explorer. I've always hated Mac OS's File Explorer. So on a very fundamental level, that was one of the bigger projects that I did, and doing database around how to visualize intuitively what folder to call, if I'm out of space or whatever, how can I zip something to be able to move faster from computer to computer, all these different things, right? You just wouldn't get for folder size, something as simple as folder size. No one has folder size, right? Like Windows doesn't have it by default, Mac OS doesn't have it by default. And so just building all those things, File Explorer was one of the bigger projects that I took on for the last couple of while, before the last year. And then the other one was the system to do project management across my machines. So basically, the final version or the current latest version of it is basically a project management tool, which just shows me all the projects that I have running or that I have, and then I can just click run, and it shows me the 5 machines that I have, and be like, this one, and this one are the ones that are needed to run this project fully, server, client, and AI inference, and then just run it. And then I have like a proxy server on DigitalOcean that puts it all behind the actual URL, so I don't have to go through Tailscale. Tailscale, by the way? Yeah. So I don't have to go through Tailscale all the time.
Yeah. I
can just run it on someone else's machine as well. So that's another kind of project that I just built, because I know there's tools for containerization and orchestration. I just felt like there's too much stuff to learn how they did it, so I did it myself. So yeah, stuff like that. And then recently, I'm building the coding assistant, my own IDE to do documentation, parsing, and my own code base, just make next edit prediction style changes, very intuitive, or trying to be intuitive, so that when I'm doing something, take the context of what I just did and predict me the next thing, as opposed to just Copilot in the line what's going to happen, or chat interface I have to explicitly tell it what's going to be my request. So yeah, always stuff,
Yeah, those are cool. So you actually touched on it again, but I want to go more into that. What is behind Kush's hood? What are you running at your home? Whatever you can share in terms of how many GPUs do you have? What are you doing to run everything here?
I would consider myself GPU poor, but some people don't think that. I have 240.
Unless you're Meta, you're GPU poor, right?
Huh? Yes, that's right. Yeah, unless you're Meta, then the whole fucking world is GPU poor, including probably Nvidia. No, I have 24090s. So I bought them in 2 years ago, right when I think after they came out, when I was putting together a new machine. My previous machines had 22080 Ti's from many years ago.
Yeah.
And so the VRAM was way higher. 2080 Ti's are 11 GB. Can you believe that stuff? 11 GB per.
Yeah.
So 24 was definitely a bump. And by the way, side note, at SIGGRAPH, in Denver.
Yeah.
Jensen is there and Zuckerberg is there in the
nice,
room, in case you
nice.
didn't know. So I actually got to ask Jensen, like, he just started an impromptu question, like in the middle of the room. So I was there and like not many people, so I just walk up to him like, can you please give us a 48 GB RAM consumer GPU? I actually got to ask him at person, but
What do you say?
but he kind of like did like a 3 minute like wavy answer around like, here's why it's hard to do memory in smaller cards or whatever. But I was like, I'm pretty sure your like A6000 is like smaller and like the same chip. So I didn't get to say any of it because it was just a one-way question. But yeah, 24090s. So I was building the machine this time explicitly for AI, because before I built the machine for VR, that's been my big focus for quite a while. But this time I knew either a little bit of gaming, which is not really happening because I haven't really gamed in forever, or VR, but definitely AI, because I could see it coming. I would need this VRAM. I remember when Bloom came out, I obviously was never going to be able to run a 176 parameter model,
Yeah.
billion parameter model, but that's why. So yeah, it's just that, and then I'm running a AMD AM5 socket first generation CPU, and then I built like a whole rig with the Obsidian 1000D Corsair case.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. You've been to my place? Not yet.
I haven't been to your place.
No,
Yeah, I'll have to come check it out.
Yeah,
for sure. And then no, because I am interested in that, because I know you're always running a bunch of stuff. You're always trying new things out,
Yeah.
downloading new models, everything. So
I just need local, like
Yeah.
otherwise it's like spinning stuff up online. Yeah.
the other thing I want to touch on is your DevOps. So what are you actually like? I know you containerize everything, but how are you switching? Because I know you're able to like churn out things very quickly, like stop one process, run another model quickly, see how it is, do inference immediately, like even remotely. So some, little bit of color onto that would be interesting.
I mean, I don't think I don't think it is that fast. I find it to be very slow. My whole process. It's why I'm trying to build tools that are. Well, it's why I'm very excited about LoRa's in general, like having more, the same model as the base, and the, like, even Apple's doing that now on device, but I haven't done that properly yet. Like the setup where I'm just like using the same base model and then dynamically switching out LoRa's. Not that I have that kind of application that I need to this explicitly train and route models that. But I think it's mostly a matter of how much VRAM I have. I have 48 to work with total. Now with Hugging Face, now with Accelerate, the library, and a bunch of other things, you are able to certainly run multiple model GPUs at the same time and fill the whole memory. So I just try and use small models. So I already have because of my lectures that use the base and the instruct.
Yeah.
I always have a base and an instruct 8 billion running. I have a transcription Whisper, Distill Whisper running.
Yeah.
I also sometimes have the Whisper regular running, because it can be, actually it's really important for the feature that I showed you for my Notes app, the vocabulary feature, because it doesn't work on the Distill model for some reason. They didn't preserve that functionality. And then I have a few image models, stable diffusion models. I mean, the comfy UI models running depending on the task that I'm doing. So I think it's more like just how much VRAM I have. I just saturate it, and I'm not really good at switching. Like, the way I switch it is in terms of the processes. I just have SSH access to my machines, and I'm just using Docker kill and Docker run, and I have like saved in the most root. Like, I have that project thing for sure, but that's like more for like when I have figured out a given project's gonna run for a few days. But most times I'm just like experimenting in the moment, so I don't go to that tool these days anyway. And so I just have a big notes sort of file where I have the Docker commands, like, here's how you run this, here's how you run that. I just copy paste it and just done.
Fair enough. No, I mean, I've seen a lot of people's DevOps configs and everything, and I think you're selling yourself short. It is a good setup. I've seen it, and I can attest to that. So
you just gotta move fast. It's very annoying when like I'm so grateful because like I was kind of like not really getting Docker for a while. Like I was like, why does it keep not working? And then I guess I spent a bit more time. Makes a bit more sense now. So now like everything is Dockerized.
Yeah. No, Docker is definitely way to go. Now, actually, Docker is an interesting point. So. Speaking of open source, right? Docker, Kubernetes, open source, and that kind of containerization tool. What are your thoughts on kind of? There's a debate going around, and there's like, okay, Kubernetes, Google is saying shilling it. Thoughts on that?
What thoughts do I have? None, because I honestly am a complete monkey when it comes to that stuff. I literally have never used Kubernetes. I feel like I haven't had clients and or projects where I have had to orchestrate resources at that level. And the one time I was at a company where I was doing a project that was a global project with multiple redundancies needed in different cloud providers. By the time that I got to that project, I hired a cloud guy, and so he was taking care of it. And so I feel like I don't have that much of a thought on the whole Kubernetes Docker way. I think my bigger thing was that I just felt very incompetent and very like just like a monkey, like around understanding stuff. So I just kept averse from like just away from Docker for long enough time where I was like, no, I don't know, it seems to always go wrong, and just didn't feel like it was worth my time to debug. I used to like for like a couple of years, like I always done like raw WordPress as well for clients. I was doing full on Docker WordPress, sort of,
Nice.
you did everything Docker for a while, and then it stopped working, and I was very upset for a year, so didn't use it at all. So I think I don't have opinions on that. I think just as long as it works. I don't know any other mechanism that is like popular enough for virtual machines than Docker in most like repos and just like how people talk about it. And I think the ability for even just AI models to help me debug it, which is the big one, right? Like you need something in the distribution. So if there's a new tool that comes out for this thing, I would try and learn it. But at least for now, for debugging this stuff, it's good to use something that people are actually using, like Docker. So but isn't Kubernetes for more like larger orchestration anyway, right?
Yeah, it's more so larger orchestration. When you have a lot of services running and you want to, distribute around, or if you want to switch clouds, actually, it used to be better for switching clouds, but if you had like whole, EKS server on AWS, you wanted to migrate over to Google Cloud easily. Kubernetes made it easy, but
did you know that these guys Defang from Vancouver?
Oh yeah, Defang. Yeah. I met one of the guys.
Yeah. So I mean, like I felt like it's the kind of stuff that I was trying to do on my own small scale of like just scripts to run in separate providers. But the whole point is like, we have our own orchestration system. So, and I think it's open source or except for the cloud part. So I think I'm just trying to do a small version of that on myself, just because I want to understand the little pieces involved.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's talk about image models.
Yeah,
because I know you come from film photography background that you've had. So right now, and we're recording this August 2024 because things will change. Flux just came out.
We're recording it at 2 p.m.
Yeah, Flux came out recently.
Dude.
What's the best open source image model right now from your standpoint as a technologist and also as a photographer?
Well, I mean, so what's the best? I could never answer because I'm sure it's changed before between me looking and now. I have yet, because I was at a conference in Denver, SIGGRAPH, the computer graphics one, and so I got back just this week and been through hectic. So I haven't even checked out Flux yet, like at all. I haven't run it in my Comfy UI install, and so I couldn't really say experientially where it's at, but based on the sort of just vibes that I'm getting from Twitter and Reddit and some of the Discord servers that I'm in, it's really good. Like it supposedly is now again open source's frontier in front of closed source. I've been upset about the fact that somehow the open source space has not done Midjourney level model for a while, just because I've thought it was dataset. Maybe it is dataset. It's the same team, by the way, behind Flux that did original Stable Diffusion. Did you know that? So of course these people. So these are the same people. The same people that did the technology that originally went and was built on into the Midjourney project, and the same thing that was Stable Diffusion. So it's the same team doing Flux, Dark Forest or Black Forest, and so
Black Forest Labs.
Black Forest Labs. Yeah. So I'm very excited because I'm pretty sure, unless I'm wrong, it's Diffusion Transformers, the newer architecture, Stable Diffusion 3 architecture, I think, and so I'm very excited. I think it's doing a lot better job of following the prompts.
Prompt adherence is better on it. I've tested it a little bit. Like I'm testing it this week a little bit. Not too much. We do have a couple of products that actually use image gen, so we're looking, forward to being able to swap it over to Flux if everything goes well. We have to, do a bit of fine tuning and everything, but it should be easier. But prompt adherence is definitely better. As far as like image to image, like all the tools that are trying to image, I think it's not as capable because I think a lot of the APIs for the other models are probably.
I mean, are you saying the plugins are just not compatible yet? Like all the control and stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Might be. I mean,
that might just be a matter of time.
To me, that's the most exciting part. That's why the models come and go, and I'm definitely appreciative and that someone would open source these models. But I focus a lot more on the tooling around it, because that stuff will remain, and that stuff will at SIGGRAPH there was all these talks about like just the tooling and how to improve it and how to control it, right? I'm all about control. Like otherwise, what are you doing? It's like click button to get image is not interesting, but actually part of a visual effects pipeline in the movie industry or part of a game dev pipeline. Like I'm building the renderer. I think I told you like where I'm doing proxy geometry all the way, and instead of doing the ray tracing engine building that I've done before, I just do AI to render the final pass. And now with LCM or then with LCM, and I'm sure now with something else, you can do really fast, really high frame rate, real-time rendering with AI. And so control is very important at that point because you need cohesion between multiple frames, and so I think as each of these pieces that are already working with the previous models, like the Chinese models as well as Stable Diffusion, start to work with Flux, we're there. Like where we got another leap in terms of image quality and control.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to play with that. I honestly, I've been giving all these NLP lectures for the last while, and my next one that I'm building is computer vision and computer graphics, because I keep not talking about it.
Yeah.
And
Well, we were at the paper reading together where we talked
Yes.
about Florence, right?
Yes.
And I got to try it a little bit more since.
Yeah.
And it's actually like a pretty great model, right?
Yeah.
For just the detailed caption it gives.
Yeah.
It's good enough for most uses. It's fast.
Yeah.
But now I think you're going to see even more like segmentation models, great segmentation models coming out. Right?
Sam 2 came out. He announced it. I was like, I was at SIGGRAPH, right? And so he's like, Sam 2 is out or Sam 2 is we're releasing that. I'm like, you are? And I'm on my laptop at the time. I'm like looking it up, like, where is Sam 2? I don't see it anywhere.
Yeah.
So he's just announced it and it's not anywhere. It came out like hours after he announced it. So, but that model is great. Like it's much more focused on like real time as well. I think.
Yeah.
So I think that allows for you to have better fine-tuning data for something like Florence, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your process? Like something comes out, something like Sam 2 comes out, right? Something like Flux comes out, right? Now it's open source. You want to run it. What's your process? Do you download the weights right away? What are you doing? Like downloading everything?
I think I used to be a lot more like, well, first of all, I'll admit, I used to be a lot more, especially in the LLM space. Like, oh shit, like if you don't download it, maybe they'll just like ban it or some shit. So I was trying to hoard it, like, oh, get the weights, and like,
so you have just hard drives full of weights.
Just trying to like get the weights and store
Yeah.
them, and before they pass the next executive order to do in open source. But
they might actually. So.
Which they might. I mean, everyone's. I mean, the way I can see Andrew Yang and Yan LeCun and all the rest of them going hard every day on like Twitter and so on. Like, I'm like, hey, please don't make this law, and SB 1047 and stuff. So initially I was just like, yeah, I'd really like trying it immediately and like downloading it, but I think since you as well know, like, it's been so busy, like just doing more structured talks and like events and workshops and stuff, it is a slightly hard to like be like, oh yeah, drop everything and right now Flux came out, try it and so on. And same thing with Sam 2. Now what I do is more like I've been trying to create a tech tree for the last like month or so, very slowly, where I'm like sort of at each of those nodes and each of the branches is like, okay, this is a branch for computer vision, this is a branch for segmentation models, this is a branch that allows for real-time segmentation of it, or the audio is like, it's a TTS but like real-time and real-time with emotions or whatever, trying to create a tree and then link the actual final projects, actual open source projects that are making it possible. That way, when SAM 2 comes out, what I do, my first instinct is to be like, okay, this is the thing that I need to put in that branch or that node. So that way, then I can be like, okay, when I do actually need something, like I'm building the next sort of next few sessions of like a given project, let's say the computer vision, the computer graphics game engine project, then I know in this moment where to look for. Because like the Twitter bookmarks, like I built a scraper to like scrape all my Twitter bookmarks, embed them so I can search them. All these things I keep bookmarking and keep hearing about, and then I forget about them like the next day. It's moving so fast.
The space is moving so fast.
So I don't have a process for like actually trying. I think it's just like depending on the mood that I'm in any given day, and I have a moment to actually try. Like, and like I work late night like cafes and so on.
Yeah.
So I just put it up, and then right now it feels like I really want to try this. I just again download it at home because it's all SSH, right? So I'm just at my home. My internet is much faster than cafes.
Yeah.
So all I need to do is just SSH in and just download it there and run it there. Just disable or turn off one of the Docker other containers. So yeah, I mean the process would be simply to, and also the Hugging Face spaces have helped a lot. So there's a lot of Hugging Face spaces for everything.
You can just try.
And and in fact, the data science reading group, I was building one, but I was like, you know what, fuck it, the space is much better.
Yeah.
So we just put that up, right? So I think that also gives me some sense of like the one of the models that I was excited about forever and finally implemented it in my pipeline was Marigold. And before that, Zoe Depth. So these are the image to depth models. Yeah. But the Hugging Face space really helped a lot in the early days for me to be like, at least let me see. Is
Marigold a fork or is it?
No, I think Marigold is just its own model. Like it's like now many months old, possibly 6 to 8 months. Okay. Just a really high quality image to depth model.
Nice.
But it was great. The space allowed me to like have my own image dropped in, see what kind of context it's able to. Because I was so in Denver, I was like just taking photos of random things like architectural spaces with like weird angles just to try and see, is the model smart enough to figure out that right now this is the window and that thing is this, so that this should be way whiter, and then that the next step should be sort of darker gray. So I'm going to run them through the model whenever I have the moment to figure out how smart are you really? Are you doing it with some understanding that you're looking at a window, or are you doing it with the understanding that just like the pixels seem like it's overlapping,
Yeah.
right? So
No, I think there's two schools of thought, right? The answer is probably somewhere in between, where it's like, okay, we're gonna have these really big models, that probably closed source, or maybe some open source, like that. But realistically, the only companies that can do those really big open source models are companies like Meta, or, that have the cash to do that, that are gonna do everything. You won't even need other things. It'll just be able to do everything. It'll be able to reason. That's like one kind of school of thought. The other school of thought is, okay, you need like very tiny models. These big models aren't going to be like, you'll be able to get infinitely better value from like fine tuning a smaller model.
Yeah.
I fall more in the latter camp because I've seen it
Myself
like
as well,
in use cases that we have where we've had very small light models, even heuristic models that perform like better than some of the state and class like closed models.
Yeah.
But your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much about it. Like, all my rants about, like, I think for many reasons, including privacy, including just the kind of direction that I want the world to go in, I think smaller models are the way. I don't think having everything tethered to a centralized server is just the ideal way. Like, I love the fact that on a very fundamental, the face of it, Stable Diffusion, as well as, let's say, Llama 3.18, 8 billion, this is just the compression of the internet. Like, these are compressed little internet, USB sticks, and like you're downloading the Wikipedia data set into a USB, and you can just go into the woods offline, and you can like ask about the universe and recipes and like whatever. You can just like have conversations, and there are hallucinations or whatever. It's a matter of something. But I'm saying there's all this knowledge captured into these machines. And you don't even need that knowledge for something as simple as semantic intent parsing, something as simple as data transformation, like, hey, make this image a little bit nicer, remove the person from it, remove the river, there's a dust spot. All these different things, assuming that you needed AI for any of them, should not need a bigger model. It should be all offline, it should be all on your device, and your device is getting more and more powerful. It doesn't even need to get heated up as you run it. So I think I am all about that small models everywhere approach, because that to me is that's like the edge computing or edge AI kind of thing, where you don't have the need for the centralized, because I don't believe that we will ever have that much power in the open for large compute as people in the closed source or the corporations will have. We don't have mandates in governments, or even governments are tricky. So outside in public spheres to have that kind of money available to just use compute and so on. So I think the much better approach ideologically I want to be successful is the smaller models win. So I'm just like biased towards that. Whether or not the case can be made that actually fundamentally a bigger model is better always, I'm just opposed to it because I don't want that to be the future. I think, like you said, and Omar Khattab from Stanford, who did the DSPy library, his approach, and I really agree with him, is that you use larger models as the teacher model to fine-tune smaller models. So it's the whole prompt engineering thing is like you go ahead and pick a small model. The general approach that I think he lays out, or whoever lays out, is you pick a small model, you use it for your purpose, see how good it is. If it's good enough, perfect, your life is good, enjoy for degree of accuracy. Or if you're like, it's not quite good enough, but this bigger model is good, you generate synthetic data with the bigger model, fine-tune the smaller model. That's the whole pipeline to me is always that. So same thing applies to 8 billion is really, really good. I actually would love to push the envelope and go for like a 1.5B or 2.5B, 5 something. Go ahead and generate fine-tune data and now fine-tune that. So I think that way, and I mean, with lower res, like I think Apple is doing the same thing. I think that's why I was so happy. They didn't talk about this in the main keynote, but they talk about it in a separate video after. But that's what they were doing. They were doing everything. They were doing quantization. They were doing lower res, dynamic lower res. Like I think they had 9, one for summarization, one for something else, one for whatever. And they were doing that all on top of this, I think 7 billion or whatever billion parameter model running all locally. So dynamic lower res, right? Like adapt. So I think that's the better approach, because you don't need at all to like send this stuff online for any of it.
Well, so there's just an economic benefit too. Besides all that, if you're able to run something on device, you're saving hops, you're saving bandwidth everywhere.
And you don't as a business, you don't need to host servers. As a business, your device, some people want that. Some people want that. That's the way to keep their customers tied to them. I'm not, I think business, you do add value, you get money. But the idea of like somehow protecting this and your servers and that's how you make money, boring. So like I think if you push it to device, now your app doesn't need to host a massive inference server as your customers scale. Now you need more compute. You don't. Your customers will have devices and that will run them. to varying degree
Yeah,
of
makes sense. The
performance.
I know you. I think Llama 2 was the one where you were playing around with a lot with. I know you played around a lot with even the 8B one, Llama 2 8B. I think you were playing around with.
Yeah, it was Llama 2 8B.
I think it was
When I was
7B.
at 7B.
Maybe
Yeah,
7B.
I think that's 7B. Yeah.
But so like from all your kind of experience playing around with it,
Mm-hmm.
what were things that it was good at? What were things that it was bad at? And what do you think like? And I don't know how much you played around with 3.1, right? Sorry, Llama 3, but what do you think of these smaller models are going to have as the pros and cons, and like what do you see as weaknesses currently that you think can be fixed with LoRa's fine tuning, RLHF, all these other things we can do?
I mean, I don't think I have played with these things exhaustively in all kinds of different domains that would apply to most people. My use cases are my use cases, but I think fundamentally based on my experiments as well as just reading online and people that I sort of consider to be proper users of this technology and they're experimenting with some critical thinking. I think the fundamental thing is that if you're looking for knowledge, like warehouse, like if you're looking for these models to give you general knowledge answers, if you're looking for these models to remember certain things from the trained data and just do reasoning that's a bit more complicated, multi-step in the same answer, in that kind of case, you generally want to go for a larger model. And smaller models will almost certainly fail. The earlier ones, the later you go going, the more capability you're getting. The smaller model. I mean, Llama 3, famously, 8 billion was almost on par with GPT, or almost on par, or was on par with GPT-4 from last year, from the benchmarks that I saw. Which benchmarks, only mean so much. But I was like, that's awesome, like, because there's some reasoning tasks involved in all that, and somehow this model is doing it. So that was a massive jump from like to go from like 70B to 8 billion, being able to beat that. But generally speaking, you don't want to like rely on a benchmark to do that. You understand fundamentally that the larger model just has that ability because of the weights to answer more reasoning questions. But for, again, smaller tasks, summarization, chunking, like there was this great paper, dense X retrieval, about proposition splitting, to be able to embed text more intelligently, so that you don't have pronouns, you just like have everything with the proper any named entities reflected in each different chunk. That kind of thing you could easily do with a small model, and it serves a massive, useful purpose. So I think I always fundamentally think, as a software engineer, let me break the problem down into a small enough set of chunks that each of those chunks does not need that much, intelligence. And so if you need a little bit of intelligence, then a little model will work. And those little models will only get better. So I think Llama 2 7 billion was beautiful, and of course at that time Mistral came out with that, with their 7B. So frankly, after like a short while, I just ended up switching to Mistral, and especially Open Hermes, which is the Technium fine tune. And I just used that like for quite a while. I used it in my initial lectures, and now Llama 3 and then Llama 3 3.1.
Actually, Mistral's due.
What's that?
Mistral's due for
good. I mean, didn't they come up with a few models
they had
like
a large,
this week or something?
They had the
large 2, and then their code Strill or whatever. It's a bit overwhelming how much stuff is coming out, and the 405B is very interesting as well. I've kind of been using that as the driver with OpenRouter because I have my own ChatGPT sandbox, right? Like where I use various models, Command R and whatever else. And so I've just made 405B my primary driver now. I stopped using GPT for a long time ago. So I basically never go unless I'm like, for some reason, looking for it to automatically like web search and like take action on my behalf or something, and I'm on my phone at like a thing and like just quickly pull out, or like a friend's phone or something. But I basically never use that anymore, even for coding tasks. And so fundamentally that's my approach, is break the problem down into small enough chunks that you can solve it with a smaller model. And then if it doesn't work, then be upset about it and go ahead and use a large model. But generally, I think what happens is like, it's fine, but it's not fine in the long run that people end up just using the OpenAI API for everything as a basic starting point. And then they get complacent. They're like, yeah, it works. I don't need to swap it. And they're completely happy. They're like, until it becomes a business problem in terms of cost or whatever.
People are switching mostly, like people are venturing out because of cost for the most part. And then they're like, oh, look, the models got cheaper. And then they'll celebrate. But really, that's probably the wrong way of looking at things, right? There's a lot of tasks where, it's translation tasks, classification tasks, where you're way better off and you have better end value to your users. Fine tuning some small model, like using even like a BERT or something like.
I mean, so I built like a being the maniac that I am, I built my own custom keyboard for my phone because I hate iPhone keyboards. I can show you, like, it's just it's just spacing is all wrong. It's just nuts. I'm a UI designer as well, so I just hate it. And so I built my own keyboard, but 3 years ago for like a while. And because of the way that Apple works, they wouldn't give you the proper full autocomplete API exposed like through Swift UI to use it. And so I had to build my own autocomplete engine. And so at that time, I started using it with BERT. For some reason, GPT-2, it just didn't give me good responses in terms of next word prediction, but BERT seemed to do it like with mass language modeling. And so I used BERT, and I was running on device. No, it was a laptop. Sorry, I was running on my laptop, and I was using. But yeah, and I built like a proximity correction stuff and whatever, and it was like that was plenty intelligence for that little thing.
Yeah.
Right. Even right now, I feel like it would be dumb to try and use Llama 3.1 8B for an autocomplete keyboard, which I should really revive that project because sometimes you just don't need it.
Yeah. No, you don't. It's overkill. It's standard. Shotgun for sniper's job kind of deal.
Yeah. And I think that it makes you dumb for using it. Like because that's like you're giving it too much open-ended space to go wrong. Right, like you're like, oh, let me use this massive thing to do this, and now you could jailbreak in much bigger ways, right? Yeah. Like you can't really jailbreak BERT to do a lot, but you can maybe jailbreak the bigger model to do dumber, responses or whatever. So,
have you thought of any sort of analogy that's similar to this in other software where it's like, okay, you could do this, or you can use a small specialized tool? Because people, for the argument of like, okay, the bigger model, you can get away with the smaller model. It's like, I'm trying to think of another case where people do that, and it's hard to.
I mean, I kind of do that in general, where I'm very just suspicious of bloat, like always, right? Yeah. So I always try and separate scripts out into separate projects and folders, and so I can have like this thing just be specifically doing that. So I'm all about that. Like I mean, in general, for years and years, everything modular always. I built my own little sort of Spotlight style, command center UI where I can just type command and do that specific thing, and it was driven by simple separate scripts, JavaScript scripts, because I'm a JavaScript guy oftentimes, web developer. But yeah, that was the idea. Is like I feel like that way you have a lot more visibility into what exactly is going to happen. Again, pure function style approach, right? As for commercial software, I don't know. I mean, like in some ways it is kind of true because like there are all these different pieces of software in all these industries that do specific things. Film industry especially, like you don't really have like a one. I mean, Houdini would kind of be like that. Houdini has like compositing, has modeling and whatever, simulation. But fundamentally, even the tools that do a lot often end up being used for one specific purpose or two specific purposes, and then people go to other tools for their specialty. So I think people intuitively understand that certain kind of user interfaces, certain kind of architectures, and kind of just programming paradigm enables a certain use case better than other. Yeah. So trying to make that tool an everything tool, is just like not a great idea, not a great user experience as well. Do you have any examples you can think of like of that?
Well, I think even in general human nature, we want to specialize. Like right now, Olympics are going on, right? You have there's the decathlon, which is like you're great at all these events, but then the decathlete is not the best at the 100-meter, right? Mm-hmm. Or they're not the best javelin thrower. Mm-hmm. They're good at everything, and I'm not comparing large language models to a decathlon because I think decathletes are incredible athletes. I think actually the decathlon winner is probably like the best athlete overall, but there is a general sense that people kind of gravitate towards their specialty, right? Yeah. People are maybe structurally built for something. Similar with models, right? Models might be structurally built for something, right? And you might not just have one big shot.
I think we're also kind of veering into the conversation about like AGI and just that kind of thinking that's around. Like I think I am very grateful for the fact that we do have somewhat general models. Like Andrew Yang talks about it a lot, where he's like, it used to be you would fine tune a given model architecture for a specific purpose. You come collect data, blah blah, and now you just prompt it. Yeah. Right, and then you fine tune it if you want it.
Same. I mean, we use Sonnet, 3.5 Sonnet that's the frontier model we use right now. It's the best right now in class for anything that's complex reasoning, multi-step reasoning, or even 4.0 when we need to. So it's like I'm really happy with these models. They allow us to do incredible things. Yeah. But there's not the set all be all is just to not like call these models.
I think I think especially I think there's also like something very important to highlight is that it's one thing to use it as a user, like as me as a user using a language model for tasks, and it's another thing to have a language model be part of a pipeline as a software, piece.
Yeah.
In the secondary case, I almost always prefer the tiniest model possible. Well,
Right.
I always prefer the tiniest model possible, but almost always is a tinier model than the big ones, because at that point you were hopefully smart enough to have broken the problem down that this particular function is basically saying, here's the state, here's the user's request, produce the next step of this pipeline, or here's a document, transform it into a small document, or here's a user search query, here's the results, and now re-rank it. Like each of those things should be small enough because you have engineered a pipeline that you can use a small model for it. Now someone might look at that and be like, well, you seem like you're like taking over the process like too much. What if I wanted to keep it open-ended? Yeah, in that case, you're looking for a general model or a general piece of software. You're looking for AGI, or whatever that may be. Fun, look for that, wait for that. I'm not interested. I'm more interested in building robust pipelines, and robust pipelines means you have certain degree of control and visibility to what steps are being processed.
Yeah, the way I approach problems right now is, especially in in the NLP or a space where it's ML where a language model could do it, is first use the best in-class model right now. Open source, closed, or whatever's best at that. Some things actually Llama 3.1 is the best at, but what you do is use the biggest model, biggest baddest model you can, use it, see what it does. It gets you maybe 70%, whatever percent. Now that you've done it, now rather than maybe training a model, now you can be like, okay, what is it? Distill a pipeline, like you said, build a pipeline out, have small models in there, have things. Maybe you don't even need ML for that use case at all. Right? You might not in some cases. There's certain cases where I see people using ML where you can solve with the regex. Right. So there's overkill. So you build out the pipeline, like you said, is a great approach, and then distill it down to small functions, and then you have one pipeline, and then now you can compare, right? But the main thing people need to do is evaluate, right? You evaluate your output, evaluate what you want, and then you evaluate as you build your pipeline, and at the end you have something.
Evaluation is a big one, and also I think you remind me like the biggest reason I really kind of have been enjoying the open source stuff, and I mean I've been talking about my lectures, and like finally OpenAI did that too. Is structured output with constrained sampling, right? Like I've been talking about how open source can do it, and OpenAI has. And everyone's been talking about it. No one's doing it. Schema-based extraction, because we had LM format enforcer and we had guidance and outlines and all the rest of it. And finally, OpenAI is like, we should do it. Like, you should have done it. Obviously, everyone knows you should have done it. But it was available in the open source. It was not available online. But this is the kind of example, like you said, regular expressions, because you can do regex as well. You don't need AI to be like, hey, please, can you give me JSON? I really, really need it, whatever. No, you just constrain it. You just constrain it using actual software engineering chops. And so exactly, like sometimes you just don't need the big model. But I'm kind of interesting that you say that the approach you have is to use a bigger model and try and see how. I think there's certain ways in which that makes sense, where you're trying to see what are language models in general capable of at all, and then distill a smaller model. But I find actually I often try and create the pipeline. I often don't have that process because I already know which pieces I will not allow the AI to do.
Right.
So if there's in knowledge stuff, I will not allow AI to do that. If there's some amount of reasoning that I don't think is necessary because I already know the answer to the 3 different possibilities, like routing, then I myself will build the pipeline for routing. Right. And so I almost like don't even do that. I used to, of course, in the beginning, like let's say last year. Beginning last year. So funny, right?
It is. It was the beginning, right?
Yeah. But certainly I already try and come up with the pipeline. Okay, these are because it's kind of user stories, like almost a UX design effort. This is the story that user will follow. This is the pipeline for getting the best answer. In certain cases, you will query the database. In certain cases, you go to the internet. In certain cases, you'll use these tools. Now you have a state object that you've modified. Whatever it is, I come up with the pipeline, and then I try and see what are the narrow places in which AI has any place at all. Or is there a clever software engineering solution? Because that other approach of like looking up for a bigger model to answer it and then see how can I distill it, I think that is still putting a little bit more faith in like how good these models are initially, or maybe somehow that can limit. Or at least I feel that it can limit my thinking into like, oh, this is what's possible, or this is what AI can do. No, like I feel like you can get the fucking absolute best answer. Like assume even like there's a human in the loop.
Yeah.
Like, assume there's like a guy I've hired on Fiverr or something that's like going to sit there and just see each request. Assume that,
Yeah.
and that's the guy at the fifth part of the pipeline and before the seventh and eighth. Then say, okay, how can I divide that into an AI process with like 3 or 4? So it's interesting, like to go from bigger to smaller or smaller to bigger. I always go from like pipeline.
Again, I think I'll put a caveat out that this only for these use cases where I know the language models, like where some intelligence is needed. Usually, actually, when we were building models, here and previously what I've done on projects in the past is actually not build any ML at all. Try and come up with a heuristic algorithm that hits like 50%, even if it's rule based. To get it to hit 50%, and then now you have a baseline. Now you have an evaluation set.
Yeah.
Because everything for me is about creating the evaluation set.
Yeah.
Once you have the evaluation set, you can throw random words at it, and sometimes it might even you might get something out of it. So that's like the approach. But I think in this sphere, that's tend to be what I've been taking, especially when things involve multi-step reasoning or like RAG pipelines or something like that, where you might need some sort of language model.
By the way, I mean the evaluation thing is the most important. Like I think it really is. 100%. Like as a software engineer, have you explored the DSPy thing yourself? Like because it really you really will appreciate that philosophy.
Yeah, so DSPy I have explored a little bit. I think the actual like I don't want to say steep learning curve, but I think there's I
mean the library itself is whatever. Like like it's Python and so on. I went check it out. But the philosophies that they have and the
I agree with. And then like I see people on Twitter talking a lot about DSPy, even like the guys who do E08 really love DSPy too.
What's his name? Connor.
Connor. He's a good guy. Chatted with him a little bit, but so I think that sphere of thinking is 100% correct. And even like these frameworks you have like RAGS and things out there are like I agree with that level of thinking. Now, I don't want to be like, I'm not like a black box testing kind of guy where it's like, okay, you write the unit test first, and you pass the unit test, everything is to do the unit test. No, but use the evaluation as a metric. Like, what's the basis on which you're going to evaluate your output? You're going to have some sort of evaluation set and build it with the mind that you're going to try and achieve a better score on the evaluation set. Sometimes it's as simple as like, if it's a very small thing, you can still have like, maybe 25 it's like 25, 30 things that you're going to test. And it's like, okay, just small evaluations that you run through it. But I think I've always kind of had that mentality where you test it out. And it's, there's pros and cons. Sometimes you should need it. Maybe you spend too much time building the evaluation set and the actual, code ends up taking a little time. But I think there's just good first principles thinking to having that evaluation set and then going from there.
But I think it's also that if you have a complex enough problem where you cannot have a simple evaluation, like sometimes you can do subjective comparison for answers to questions, or here's the answer that's supposed to be, here's what we come back with, whatever. But I think sometimes the problem is a bit too many steps that you actually don't have that obvious way to produce a data set that can help with evaluation. That's the kind of thing where I've been very interested in hearing Omar and the team's like approach on like, we just have another AI do evaluation because this one can actually reflect on so it's another engine that's like doing evaluation, and then you have
the LLM in the loop.
So I think that
I like
part
human
is
in the loop evaluation. Honestly, like even if I have to pay some humans to go do it, like we will have human evaluation. Or I start with evaluating myself. And then I'll go deeper and deeper.
Well, for sure. I mean, if you have the time and the resources, and just sometimes this project is small enough and you can get it to a point with just...
There is a lot of merit to LLM in the loop type kind of evals, maybe just compare answers and things like that. But I think, we'll see. I think we're at the start of the evaluation of these things. Especially like for like RAG pipeline stuff. I think we're at the start of this, and I think we're going to see a lot more cool tools and cool ways that people are approaching it, I think.
Dude, I'm building some tools to like do visualization.
I'll test it out. 100%.
Visualization on like when you do RAG, I'm doing a UMAP visualization of all the embeddings to say these are the ones that got. Actually, I saw it in deep learning AI, something like this, where like I want to visualize like, these are the things that actually got fetched, and then now when you change the query, something else got fetched, and then actually out of these got re-ranked. And when you re-ranked, actually, that was the first one. This was the second one, even though the query is over here. Why is that, right? So try and really get intuition around, because you know that the visual. Well, I haven't showed but the live typing. So as you type, the embedding should move. I showed like a previous iteration of that at the Novus thing, and so I want to see. I want to show how like intuitively it's going in a certain direction, right, in a different direction, and why the results are better. And for my own self, I want to like use that as a way of evaluating the agents or the pipelines that I'm building.
Yeah, nice. So one thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is web scraping.
Uh-huh.
So what are your thoughts on web scraping? Should it, like, besides the legality of it, like, do you think it's web scraping is good or bad inherently? If the data is out there, there's a thought. It's like the data is out there. It's the open web. I should be able to scrape it and use this data. It's my data, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like, okay, it's that company's data. They put it
Yeah.
out there. They did the work to structure it. They should have protection over it,
Yeah.
right? Another kind of two schools of thought. So
So my question is this: is there any chance at all that you don't know the answer? I mean, I obviously like
obviously, I'm assuming you're in the
it's like
but
fuck,
the
fuck yeah. Like
two
I
things
mean,
I'll say is, okay,
yeah.
one is where's your barrier?
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, is it logs in? Is it pay gates? Where's kind of your barrier to, like,
I think the barrier. So yeah, I mean, I've scraped forever. Like it's the fucking way to, like. I think this one of the beautiful things about the internet is that it's open language, so you can actually look behind the. They can look at the code. It makes scraping easier. All this stuff. I think. So I'm all about it. Come on, it's public internet. Like the whole idea of like New York Times and so on. Like, oh yeah, you scraped our articles and you used, like, bro, you got plenty of clout and plenty of influence on culture by actually publishing your articles. Like now you're gonna complain that someone is reading your articles and using it to train further models. Like we all read it. We all were propagandized by your stuff. So what are you complaining about, right? So I don't agree with. I think yes, you should be scraping it, especially public stuff. Like definitely. I think and you have a lot of value in. Just getting real data and working with it and so on. Blockers, I think, are that you have the biggest blocker probably is that just everyone's using different kind of technologies, which I think is good. Like I do want the Wild West always, everyone should be using whatever. But it's probably like just like these larger what do you call them? Libraries or platforms that like have like their code embedded in different websites and the way that they do it. And I think and then they monitor who's coming to them and so on. I think they help with like blocking certain IPs if they hit you too much or whatever. I think so. If you're trying to really like be naughty, let's just say, naughty is a weird word, on the internet, then maybe you would need some kind of complicated setup where you go to AWS and like spin up a bunch of instances and like don't use your own API or whatever, or don't use your own IP to scrape. But generally speaking, I think I mostly scrape more like these days more like data interpreter style. So open up a web browser window, have a Chrome extension run things randomly. I'm not doing that much scraping. I'm mostly doing things like the event organization app that I was telling you about, because I hate that I can never find proper events happening in Vancouver and people are telling me. And like nowadays I know lots, but still there's things I'm missing. So I built the scraper to get all the Eventbrite, Meetup, Luma, everything else. Just one consolidated calendar. So I can like pick and choose and like.
Dude, I would love to. I'd love to just even like if you send it to me, just see it. I'd love to run it.
Right. So I need to update it to like the latest. Just like to have it run it recently. The last time I worked on it was like a month ago or more. But yeah, like basically, so in that case, it's like just like a couple of pages of scraping every day. Let's say once in the morning, Eventbrite, 20 pages. That's it, right? And so I think with that, it's a more fun approach, or just the easier approach, let's put it that way, to do the data interpreter, open up the window, use Puppeteer or Selenium to go through the process.
Have you used Playwright, by the way?
Playwright. Yeah. I think I use it. I think you mentioned it as well. To use it, but I have not done this stuff in like a month, and the number of things that are on my mind, I don't even know which one is my preferred approach right now. But the point is that that's kind of more of my approach right now, is to just open up the window. It's way easier, In fact, honestly, the farther we go into this, we'll probably end up using visual models to even do. Like there was a model came out a year ago, Fuyu 8 billion or something, and it was like at that time it was like, hey, this one's really really good at UI parsing and whatever. I don't remember ever actually using it, but I remember being excited. Like maybe that could be one way that I would scrape, is like identify which button I need to click on this UI to scrape properly, and then is there a more button? Click the more button before you scrape.
There's this is a whole different conversation. I think I know some people who like their companies are scraping, right? So shout out to them. So I mean, I will. That's definitely probably something I want to have on the podcast one time.
Their companies are scraping, and there's like they're building tools for scraping, and the Jinja or whatever that name is. So their entire offering is scraping.
So it's gonna be it's pretty cool. The final thing I have is what are you working on right now? What's next? What's exciting you? That's something's coming up or something you want to talk about that you're.
Yeah, I mean, so like basically like this whole year I've just been on a whole like back-to-back sort of lecture and workshop thing, and then took a break, went to Denver, came back, kind of just feeling a bit, I think, overwhelmed, or like, I don't know, whatever. Just like, just like too much going on, people to
Yeah.
get back to and so on. So I'm slowly doing that. I think the bigger thing that I want to do now is a workshop series.
Okay.
So in Vancouver, hands-on, coding workshop on LLM, from like just basics to structured data to views to RAG to possibly agents, but I think agents is a mixed thing. How to do it, mostly pipelines. And so I kind of want to set that up properly, build code bases for it, build decks for it in lectures. And then I also want to do computer vision and computer graphics lectures,
Nice.
So mostly there's that. On my own personal projects, as you know, like the coding assistant is the bigger one. I really want to, because I feel like every single thing is suffering because I don't have that, because I keep not using Cursor or any of these, things that are out there,
Yeah.
because I want to build my own. And then I feel like my process is suffering as a result because I'm not using the best tools out there, which I'll admit, I know that I'm not doing it and it's bad, but I feel like if I give into it, then like I'll get complacent and I won't continue working on my tools. So
Yeah.
so
So fair enough.
mostly-
That's an interesting topic because in sometimes it does handicap you. Like
Yeah,
one time
yeah.
I was like, I'm so used to having Copilot or Cursor on. I use both. I change around,
Yeah.
whatever. But and then one time I was on the plane. I needed a code because I was on the plane. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, now let me fire up
Yeah.
whatever I can run here, Llama 8.
Yeah.
And then I was doing whatever the open source one is,
Yeah.
like the VS extension, which is I had Llama running with
Yeah.
Llama 8V,
Yeah.
and then I was like, okay, let me do it from here. And I felt handicapped a little bit. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So then I shut off it for a week. I
Yeah.
shut off all of these.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I need to go back to basics
Yeah.
and just without any of these. And I think I was thinking probably about the problem a little bit better.
Yeah.
I was probably like less efficient for sure. That's
Yeah.
not
No,
admit.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but I like these tools are there to help us, right? Make us way more efficient. But
That part is very true,
It
by the
does
way.
like you do lose it a little bit.
Oh,
So you have
100%.
to be
It's
careful.
very true. I really, even same thing again, flight on my way from here to there.
Yeah.
I was coding up some components for the day view for my calendar, because I was like parallel tracks, etc. Graph. So how do
Yeah.
you organize? And yeah, I had and for some moronic reason, I deleted the weights for the latest Llama. I think Llama 3 is the one I ran. I wasn't on my machine. And so I'm like, are you kidding me? You're on a flight, open source guy, and there is 0 big weights on my machine that I can run. Not that I had a battery pack anyway, so running that on my model, on my phone, on my laptop, on my flight would probably have just killed it quick. But I'm like, shit, okay, I'm without the model now, so I'm just coding gradually, slowly. Took a while,
Yeah.
and I was like, when I was doing the game engine stuff, like with Vulkan and C++, like there was no one, like there was just like this one guy, awesome guy, Arseny on YouTube, who was like teaching, and beyond that there was no one. So at that time, if I had this LLM telling me like, hey, here's how you debug C++ at least, or maybe Vulkan sometimes, would have been useful. But now I feel like I'm just like fully allowing myself to let go of a lot of the critical thinking that I would need. And I feel like I'm okay with it because it is, like 10xing me or whatever. Like it is helping my productivity a lot, and be able to dream bigger projects. And that's why I have multiple going on all the time nowadays. And yeah, like there is something to be said about like some obvious shit you're forgetting. But it's more like that kind of stuff maybe only hinders you when like you have an interview or something, and then someone asks you like, hey, can you do this specific thing freely? And I'm like, okay, in this moment now I'm not used to the specific thing. Maybe you'd feel like you're out of practice. But otherwise, like I've always been for open book exams and open book kind of approach. So use all the tools you have to your benefit. Why would you handicap yourself in that way?
Yeah. One quick thought is having a local language model in an area where you don't have internet connection is unlimited entertainment.
Yeah.
Everyone should just play around with it.
Yeah.
You can go into your imagination, do
Yeah.
next word completion of whatever you want. You can pretty much get read a book. If you know the starting of book, you
Yeah.
can probably get passages.
Yeah.
It's insane. All right, Kush, last question. But so you have expertise, and I'm gonna say expertise. You're gonna be like, no, you know what? In a lot of different things, you are. So what is your personal process for learning? Because I know like you didn't go to school for all this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you're not taking even like whatever online courses, and I know that you're a guy who learns by doing for most of these, but still there's even when you're learning by doing, there's always like a starting point, right? And then there's like, okay, so understanding the theory, understanding maybe these are the concepts I needed. So what are some tips that you have for like learning a new thing? Like some new thing comes out now, you want to learn it, or you're interested in something.
Yeah.
So just from your perspective as like a multifaceted expert.
I mean, a multifaceted expert. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm the one complimenting. You can take it.
I'm blushing now. No, I think it's so the online course thing is more like I'm not a boot camp guy. I'm not one of those, like I don't like that sort of structured approach for sure. But no, I am fundamentally here wherever I am, like in Vancouver at this point, and doing what I'm doing, absolutely because of the beauty and generosity and kindness of people online that taught me all of this stuff for free. Like you said, like I didn't go to software school like ever. I didn't do CS. I did film school and I did art school, basically design. But I've always loved and built software because just people have made it really really easy to learn this stuff online. And so definitely I've watched lots of courses, lots of tutorials, lots of read lots of articles about philosophies and ideologies and manifestos on here's how good software should be written, here's how this technology should work, and just so on. And I think I'm not that big on reading the fucking manual, but I certainly have, always appreciated a really nicely put together README on repos, which is not very much the case with a lot of the scientific research kind of stuff, because the people just don't know how to document, or at least they didn't used to know how to document. I feel like it's gotten better how people document these things these days, especially in the AI space. It's gotten better. So my approach is generally, if there are people that I respect to an extent, being good educators, have some kind of resource on it, video or something, I always will go for video first. Just very quick fire, ingestion of knowledge. And then second is to just try and run it. Just go to the repo, try and run it first. It tells me whether it's runnable and something is broken, because if it's broken, I don't want to waste my time like learning something that is broken and I can't run it.
Yeah.
And then B, as I start playing with it, I think the bad habit that I have, probably, I think it's a bad habit, is to like just not even read at all like how it's supposed to be run and just try and start playing with it. And then I end up burning a few hours and then I'm like, fuck, it's so frustrating. And then I go ahead and read the documentation and like, yeah, I guess this is how it works. What are you doing? So my process is generally like, and the biggest thing I guess to answer is like I always have a goal in mind. So when I go and actually start using something, like the reason I haven't started playing with Flux or SAM2 yet is because I haven't had the project that I need this for resumed since like whenever it came out. So what I often do is like, this is the thing that I'm trying to build right now. I'm trying to build whatever it may be, a rendering engine with real-time rendering using AI. So right now I know exactly what I need to use for it. At that point, you're solving a specific problem, so you're gonna be your best self in critically cutting out any noise and otherwise you'll get easily distracted by whatever shiny thing that comes in. I was building, for example, for a long time, 2 years ago, and then till now, the real-time transcription thing, right, for my Jarvis thing. And so like I have a very sort of somewhat narrow goal, and also on the text-to-speech side as well, but narrow enough goal. Both don't really need to be connected because I'm not doing a singular model. So it's nice because you know exactly what you're going for. So then you can try different libraries on GitHub. You can try different models, the distill thing, whatever. You can find the problems in each of them. But it's because you have a goal of what you're trying to build. You'll be able to like orient yourself. I think if you don't have a goal, then oftentimes you just like use it and you learn it and you think it's very cool, and you certainly do understand the vocabulary of it, which is very helpful in general in talking to people and learning from them. But you realize, well, I forgot everything, right? Like 2 days pass and you've forgotten everything. I certainly forget everything, basically. I don't remember anything except for the things that I'm repeating and the things that I'm using. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of the process, how I think.
Nice. Well, Kush, thanks so much for your time. This is a great
Yeah,
talk.
dude.
And yeah, we gotta. There's a lot of stuff I gotta follow up on you on. I gotta see your, a bunch of projects you mentioned. I gotta check them out.
Well,
I gotta come check out under the hood.
Yeah.
Your rig as well.
Yeah.
Thanks. And then anything else you wanna mention?
No, I'm good, man. Like I appreciate it. I feel very flattered to be on a podcast. But yeah,
Sure.
good.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, dude. Fucking good hanging out.
Good hanging out, man.